You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair. So on 60 Minutes on Sunday, President Biden tried to downplay the negative impact of 40-year high inflation. He basically said that 8.3% inflation isn't that bad because it hasn't spiked recently. As you also know, the second quarter's GDP was negative for the second consecutive quarter, which is the textbook definition of a recession. Of course, President Biden is trying to deny this as well. Now, as the leaders of financial institutions that deal directly with American consumers every day, I'd like to ask you some brief questions to gauge the financial health of the average American consumer. And I'll just stick with for lack of time, I'll stick with the North Carolina institutions, if you would please. Mr. Rogers of Truist and Mr. Moynihan of Bank of America. And just brief answers, if you would. It could be yes or no, or just a sentence or less. So are consumers' savings decreasing?
Consumer savings are actually quite stable at this particular juncture after having grown for quite a few months.
Mr. Moynihan?
Consumer deposits are stable.
Are they using up more credit now than they were a year ago?
Consumers are starting to access more credit, particularly in the area of credit cards.
Mr. Moynihan?
Credit card balances have grown since last year, but aren't back to pre-pandemic levels yet.
So when you factor in inflation, are consumers' real wages down? Mr. Rogers?
If you factor in inflation, for most consumers, I believe real wages would be down.
Real wages are down. Thank you, Mr. Moynihan.
On a one-year basis, the inflation rate exceeds the wage growth.
Okay. Has the number of consumers with access to, say, $1,000 for emergency, has that gone up or down?
Consumers currently have more in their checking accounts, and so the opportunity to have an emergency savings account has actually increased during the last few years.
Okay. Mr. Moynihan?
Consumer deposits in their accounts are multiples of where they were pre-pandemic.
Do you think the economy will get worse before it gets better? Mr. Moynihan? Yeah. Let's switch it around. Mr. Moynihan first.
I said earlier that our experts have positive GDP growth for this quarter and a negative GDP growth for the next couple of quarters. That's their base assumption, the research team that we have.
Mr. Rogers?
We have a very similar forecast.
Thank you. We see that the state of our economy is not good. President Biden's failed economic policies have made life worse for working families in North Carolina and across the country. So according to the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, the personal savings rate has been declining since March of last year, and it's the lowest since 2008. A recent survey said that 60% of respondents have been in more credit card debt than over the last year. And according to the New York Federal Reserve, they reported that household debt surpassed $16 trillion for their first time ever in the second quarter. According to the Census Bureau, the median household incomes have remained stagnant or declined 2 years in a row. According to Bankrate, 56% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense with savings anymore. A recent ABC News poll found that 69% of respondents said that they think the U.S. economy is getting worse. So bottom line, Americans are buying less, earning less, saving less, while paying more for their daily lives. It's what I see in all 100 counties in North Carolina. Life seems to have gotten worse under President Biden, and I believe that it's time that he admits it. Thank you all for your time. I yield back.